It is the Tuesday following Black Monday, so Ross and I put on our black Locked On shirts, and we are going to recap all of the crazy stuff that happened on Black Monday here on the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans? It is Locked On NFL, your Tuesday episode here on the show, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As you have every Tuesday, you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, daily host of Locked On Vikings, and myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola, daily host over at Locked On Saints. And one of us has a coaching and a GM opening that we're going to be talking about all throughout the offseason, but not just the offseason, specifically today because it is Black Monday. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends over at onlinegambling.com. It's the place to get all of the latest gambling news and tips all throughout the NFL playoffs. So make sure you visit onlinegambling.com/NFL so that you can get the edge over the competition throughout this year's playoffs. Luke, so many job openings across the NFL. You and I might be able to get a head coaching or a GM job because of just simply how much is going on. We know that a few of these have already been open, but we're going to talk through some of the big moves on Black Monday here on this Tuesday episode. And I want to start off with, I think, the biggest surprise of all of this, right? Brian Flores out after, another winning season, coming off of a 10-6 season, right? Where he was 19 and math, getting into those first 2 years. He finished his 3 years there, 24-25 over the course of that time, but yet he is out as the Miami Dolphins head coach. And I have to tell you, I did not expect this move.
I'm sorry, did you say 19 in math?
19 in math, because I couldn't quickly get what the losses were.
Fair enough. Okay. So, yeah, Brian Flores is out, and that's wild. So it sounds like there was like a power struggle. It sounds like this was not like a merit, you didn't do good enough, so you're getting fired, which is usually what it is. It sounds like they didn't agree internally over Tua Tagovailoa, and Brian Flores wanted to move on. Everybody else in the org didn't, and so Brian Flores goes out. And I guess you stand your ground, and you stand firm, and you walk out with your head held high, but now he's got to see... I don't know. It's all rumor and smoke right now, and who knows what's just coming from Brian Flores' agent to hype him up. But it sounds like his phone's ringing off the hook. Maybe he gets another head coaching job. Maybe he ends up as the head coach of one of the teams we're going to talk about next.
Very possible.
But it seems like when it's a surprise like that, it's a surprise because on merit, Brian Flores did well with what he was working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some people will point to like some game mismanagement things. They'll point to some issues across the offense. But I thought, like, you look at him as 4-2 against the New England Patriots, the dreaded rivals within that division, right? The only coach with a winning record against Bill Belichick over the Bill Belichick era. They finish up the season 8-1 after losing 7 straight, right? They have that big win streak that propels them toward the end. They finish off the season with another win over Bill Belichick and those playoff destined New England Patriots. And I thought for sure, Kyle Krabs talked about this over at Locked On Dolphins in his emergency podcast after the firing, that this was, let's just say the move. I thought that they were just going to kind of say, okay, we need to fix sort of the offensive personnel here and really pay attention to what's going on offensively. But Mr. Flores, Coach Flores, will see you again in 2022. And then, if things don't get better, then we'll have a serious conversation after that. So I was very surprised about that. But there was another move here that I don't know that folks were very surprised about. We've even talked about it here on this show. And of course, it's with your Minnesota Vikings, who have moved on from head coach Mike Zimmer as well as GM Rick Spielman. How are you feeling about this move, and what do folks need to know about it?
Yeah, it was, I think the writing had been on the wall for most of the end of the season for people like close to the Vikings and Minnesota fans and stuff. We all knew here. But basically, Kirk Cousins joined the Vikings in 2018. So you take that, this is a 4-year kind of trial of Kirk Cousins, Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman, made the playoffs once as a 6th seed in 4 years. That ain't good enough. That'll get you fired. Now it's kind of coming out. Now the rats are fleeing the ship a little bit. It's kind of coming out that there are players who are really unhappy with he's a little brash, his style. There had been reports about that for a long time. If you were really really deep into it, you could have seen that. I mean, he's a rough, gruff Bill Parcells guy that doesn't mesh with everybody. And now Eric Kendricks said, maybe the way forward isn't a culture of fear, which was a very interesting quote. So we're all in panic mode. Yeah. Which is crazy from Kendricks, who is like the greatest human ever. Like that's like the nicest person in your friend group telling you you're being a jerk. He's from Fresno,
California. Like he's fine,
Yeah, so wild stuff there. And then, of course, Rick Spielman sounds like they actually offered him a cushy, like, fake job as, like, vice president of operations of nothing. And he didn't take it. And there actually might be some fallout to that as well. So either way, the nuke button has been pressed. It is now new coach, new GM, new direction, new everything. We don't know what's going to happen to Kirk Cousins. We don't know what's going to happen to any of the assistants, any of the big players on big contracts. Totally fresh start for Minnesota.
Big stuff there. All I know is Mike Zimmer is going to make some team very, very happy as their defensive coordinator in 2022. And that's
who's his friend? He's got any old Parcells friends? Maybe somewhere else in the NFC?
We got a couple. Who
might need a defensive coordinator soon?
Very possible. Very possible. Because I also believe that there is a defensive coordinator that you happen to be referencing that would be very good for Minnesota as a potential head coach. So maybe there's just like a little switch here. Like they just switch apartments or something.
Speaking of defensive masterminds that might be hitting the market.
Absolutely. That's going to bring us to our next coach in Vic Fangio out with the Denver Broncos. This is another one that feels like it was kind of like written on the wall. But I think that when it comes to Vic Fangio, he's going to be another one of those guys that, and this often happens with defensive-minded head coaches, which, we're talking about Brian Flores, we're talking about Mike Zimmer, we're talking about Vic Fangio. These are all defensive-minded guys. Oftentimes, they don't just get another shot immediately at head coach. I could see that happening maybe for Brian Flores, just considering how sort of weird and
circumstances
unexpected.
Are weird. Yeah, somebody says, hey, but you were right about Tua, so I'm good with you getting him.
Right, exactly. But Vic Fangio, Mike Zimmer, these guys might need to reset a little bit before they get future opportunities at head coach or whatever. Maybe they're just happy as defensive coordinators because they're both going to make very, very good ones. And Vic Fangio is definitely one of those guys whose phone is probably already ringing off the hook for some potential DC interviews or DC openings as soon as they, kind of figure all of that out.
If you look around the league and you see what people are doing schematically, they all took it from Vic Fangio. Right. Vic Fangio has figured out the wide zone and everybody copied him. And so all the stuff you see about...
he had to.
Right. A lot of what he did helped, I think, the Bucs in the Super Bowl last year. People have still... And there's your mastermind, right? There's your brain you might want to have in the room. So again... excellent if you can get him for a DC opening. Maybe he holds out for a head coaching job, pulls a Mike McCarthy or a Doug Peterson, where they hold out for a year and maybe we only want a head coaching job. But we'll see what happens. But hey, speaking of waiting too long for stuff, how long are you planning to procrastinate on your taxes this year?
April 15th, so probably the day of.
It's April 17th about?
Oh, April 17th. Yeah, something like that.
Look, your taxes can be scary, especially if you're in unusual circumstances. It can mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live experts, that's what makes things interesting. Life changes are exciting, and they usually have tax implications. Maybe you were a full-time employee. Maybe you're freelance now. Maybe you started driving for one of those rideshare apps, and maybe you're doing a 9-to-5 job on top of that. All of this stuff can make your taxes really complicated. Luckily, TurboTax Live has experienced experts dedicated to answering all of your tax questions and finding every deduction for you. You can talk to them from your phone without ever having to leave your house. Whether you got married, had kids, changed careers, whatever, TurboTax Live experts are ready to help you with your unique tax situation and get you the best tax outcome. So TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life can mean an even greater refund. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing, they got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live.
All right, everybody, continuing on with this episode of Locked On NFL. Luke Braun, Ross Jackson here with you. And as always, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day here at Locked On NFL with this Tuesday episode, getting you all caught up on everything that happened around the NFL for Black Monday. We're going to talk about another team here that, much like Luke's Vikings, moved on from not only the head coach, but also the GM, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, both out in Chicago. This is one that maybe... you ever feel like maybe sometimes these moves happen like a year late or something like that, or maybe
I think everybody feels that way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where this one is, especially with the Matt Nagy one in particular, right? Ryan Pace helped make the moves to get Justin Fields in there, so he's got that part with him. But for Matt Nagy, I feel like this is a year late, so I'm glad to see them moving on and sort of ushering in this new era in Chicago.
Yeah, I think just about everybody in Chicago wanted this to happen last year before these guys got to pick a quarterback. And maybe they're happy with Justin Fields. I mean, of course, Justin Fields is really popular right now. So maybe it worked out, but I think people are still like, I kind of wish we actually had people picking their own quarterback here because now somebody has to inherit Justin Fields. And that's going to limit who you can hire and all that stuff. But I think maybe more interesting to me was the absolutely unhinged McCaskey press conference that happened.
Yeah.
Where he talked about how his mommy was disappointed in him and called Olin Kreutz a liar. Like, it was insane. Those two things happened, and I'm not exaggerating.
I know. And the thing that's so wild is that, like, and I saw this from a couple of Saints beat writers as well, because, Olin Kreutz, formerly in sort of popular stories around, like, him in the locker room and an altercation with Drew Brees and, like, some things. So, like, there's a really specific sort of, like, history when it comes to Olin Kreutz. And sort of like on randomly Monday, January 10th of 2022,
he's catching
that
strays.
Olin Kreutz is catching strays. I was just like, my goodness, what is going on here? So it was a wild situation for sure.
Like, I can't imagine being a GM candidate, right? And you're looking at the two, because that press conference happened simultaneously with the Vikings. Mark Wilf was doing one. That was this very corporate, buttoned up, like, PR thing. And he's talking about how, like, well, we won't get in your way. And, we want to make sure we get good leaders and everybody works together. Kumbaya. We're like super, like, PR approved stuff. And then you have the McCaskey one going completely off the rails. And I can't imagine being a GM candidate going like, which road do we go down? Lauren and I debated on this on Crossover Thursday. Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears debated on which team you think is in a better position. And that's a check in the Vikings box right there, because that was a mess.
That ended up working out really, really well for you. So we'll see what happens there. I love your point about the limitations that come with a quarterback already having been selected.
Right. And if you like Justin Fields, that's great. But you have to.
Right. But it does limit the list, right? Because there are potential coaches out there that might not like Justin Fields as a prospect, right?
Yeah.
And then that ends up, you're not going to bring that guy in. You're just not, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've invested highly in this guy. You believe in this guy as an organization. And so you're not going to bring in a coach that's going to be like, not my quarterback. So I think that becomes the big thing.
Yeah, like with the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. If you don't like Kirk Cousins, you can trade him. There are teams that'll trade for him. If you do like Kirk Cousins, you can extend him. The option is there. And with the Justin Fields one, and I guess to move on, like Trevor Lawrence with Jacksonville. If you like Trevor Lawrence, you're into Trevor Lawrence, and I can't imagine not being, then that's great. If you don't like Justin Fields, if you watch what he did this year and you're worried about him or whatever, it might be harder to court people. Plus, if your ownership looks completely unhinged, I don't know if you want to work for that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you don't want to make his mommy disappointed.
No.
Let's take a look.
Jesus.
Next at the New York Giants. New York Giants. Joe Judge still in the building, but David Gettleman, the man of hog mollies, has retired, and he will no longer be the general manager in New York. And the David Gettleman thing, I think, like, someone that we know closely referred to it as sort of the worst kept secret.
Right.
Amongst,
yeah. Patricia is talking about that.
Yeah.
Because
we all kind of know that we all kind of like expected that to be the case this season. But I was shocked and am still shocked at this point, and it's not a done deal by any means, but that Joe Judge is at least presently still the head coach of the New York Giants.
Yeah. If I wanted to be nice to the Giants, and I don't think I do, but if I wanted to be nice to the Giants, I would say something like, well, you don't necessarily know if Joe Judge is going to stick around. Maybe they just decided to let the new GM make that decision. And I mean, that's what the Vikings are doing with all their staff. The new GM is going to come in and make the choice. They haven't fired anybody else on the whole staff other than Zimmer and Spielman themselves. So maybe that's the case there. But really, it seems to me like the Giants have just had too many failures. They had, like a year of McAdoo, 2 years of Pat Shurmur, and now Joe Judge for what they haven't made it to year 3 with a coach, and they seem really nervous about having that revolving door. And I think they're just sticking to someone for the sake of sticking to someone, which is just throwing away more years. You got to maybe try to hire someone who's good this time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You really do. Like, you have to look at the opportunity here, especially when you have a failing young quarterback, you have an offense that can't get it together, and you went ahead and like pulled together, you pulled all of your assets to bring in a guy like Kadarius Toney. You went and spent big on a guy like Kenny Galladay, and how many touchdowns those guys score? You got nothing out of them.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse for that. There's simply no excuse for that. And so I think it's perplexing at this point that Joe Judge is still there. And I hope that the new GM that comes in is wise enough to say, this isn't the direction that we want to go.
I will say injury is probably an excuse. Like but
Injury's
it's still
a little
like,
bit of it, sure.
But like the way that the Giants have managed that cap, the way they've thrown money around in free agency has been a disaster. They haven't won more than 6 games since 2016. I mean, it is a mess in New York right now. And I don't know, like, do you really want to inherit that as a GM candidate? You are picking up a roster that probably needs to go down before it can go up, just because of the way that their cap is allocated. It's really and you don't even get to pick your head coach, and that guy's Joe Judge that nobody in the organization likes. Like, the locker room's about to riot.
Right.
So I would not be shocked if Joe Judge doesn't make it to training camp. The new GM comes in and says, "Well, this is a mess. We're getting rid of the coach and we're building this from the ground up." I don't know if the book is quite sealed on that, like it is for, the actual other 2 GM spots where the coach is like straight up fired.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if you ride the Joe Judge experiment for another year, so that as a new GM coming in, you can kind of blame everything on that and then reset next year, so that when it does get worse, it gets worse because of the coach that should have been let go a year early, as opposed to like any decisions otherwise that were made, and then you can kind of be the hero that comes in and cleans up after that. I don't know. We'll see how it all goes. But all I'm saying is that it ain't working. It ain't working. But we also have Jacksonville, their coaching job is open. The Houston Texans, their coaching job is open, as well as the Las Vegas Raiders, who are currently
Texans
in the
maybe.
playoffs. Texans might be open.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't know about David Culley. That would be kind of wild. David Culley was kind of a sacrificial lamb. Like, nobody was going to have success with where the Texans were such a mess this season.
Right.
Nobody's going to come in and have success there. So firing David Culley seems a little weird, but it sounds like they might do it. We don't really know. Probably going to have to pick it up here on Locked On NFL sometime later this week with some of the other hosts. But yeah, Raiders have an opening, Jags have an opening. We've talked about that. But Raiders can't fill that opening. They have a playoff game to get ready for, which is wild. That's the first time that's ever happened, an interim head coach in the playoffs. I mean, those players are playing for each other, and that's something kind of special. Maybe they just go with Bisaccia. Like, that could be fine. So much interesting stuff to watch, and let's get into it a little more. But first, let me tell you about my new favorite app. It's a free App Store, Google Play. It's called Get Upside. And if you download it, it'll show you what gas stations are in your area that are participating. And if you go get gas at those, you can get cash back. Just straight up. That's it. No catch, no silly nonsense, no tricks. Just cash back. 25 cents off a gallon at the pump when you fill up using the Get Upside app. If you sign up now, you can use promo code Touchdown. And on your first fill up, you get up to 50 cents a gallon off at the pump when you fill up with the Get Upside app. If you add all that up, and if you drive a lot, that's like $200-$300 a month. It's insane. And it's just right there for you. You can deposit it however you want, just direct deposit, no catches. You could do Amazon gift card or Google Play or whatever if you'd rather do that. It is all right there for you. Just take a picture of your receipt when you fill up, upload it on the app, and it just works. So go get the Get Upside app, use promo code Touchdown, and start saving on gas. What are you doing? Also, so the playoffs are going on, and we all want to gamble on it, but we're looking for an edge, right? You want to win those bets. You don't just want to place them. If you're looking for that edge, you should head over to onlinegambling.com. It's a website dedicated to giving gamblers that edge. Throughout the playoffs, they're providing you with the best NFL tips, news, and more to make your bets as informed as ever. They are trying to inspire every gambler to beat the odds. Go to www.onlinegambling.com and check out the latest NFL playoff news and all the tips on how you can get the edge. Visit the website for NFL tips ahead of the playoffs before you place your bets, and you can get all of those latest tips. They have all sorts of trusted experts and experience online giving you the right advice to make informed decisions sourced by experts. So consult onlinegambling.com before you place that wager. Make sure you visit onlinegambling.com/NFL for all the latest gambling news and tips to give you the edge throughout the playoffs. Remember, onlinegambling.com/NFL to make the most of this year's playoffs.
All right, everybody, wrapping up this episode of Locked On NFL. We're talking about Black Monday. We're going through all of the coaching firings, the moves that were made at GM positions as well. And now, Luke, I just want to get into a simple question here. And I want to talk about the best jobs that are available, right? And we'll start with the head coaches. Let's assume that 6 head coaching positions are open. We'll move the Houston Texans out for right now.
Put a bit in them, yeah.
Yeah, but out of the 6 that we know are open, we look at the Denver Broncos, the Chicago Bears, Miami Dolphins, Las Vegas Raiders, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Looking at the head coaching positions, let's talk about our top 3 jobs that are there. You want to kick us off and give us your top 3 that are open?
Yeah, I think my top 3 are, I really like that Broncos gig. You get to pick your own quarterback. You're not tied to a quarterback. You've got stable ownership. George Payton has a bit of a longer leash as a GM, so you have some time to sit there and grow. You're not going to be under a ton of pressure immediately, at least as far as head coaching jobs go. I like that Broncos gig a lot, and for me, I like the idea of being able to choose a quarterback rather than being stuck with one. But if you like a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa, like if you're a Tua fan and you want to work with Tua, go work with Tua. That's a phenomenal thing. Everybody in that organization just fired a guy for not wanting to work with Tua. So if you do, you're not going to have a problem there, right?
Right.
But to me, that feels like pigeonholed, which is why I'm a little bit more hesitant about like the Bears job or the Dolphins job or the Jaguars job. I like the Vikings job a lot. Again, very stable owners. The Wilfs they want to be like the Steelers. They want to be, very, very patient. So I like the Vikings job for that reason as well. Plus you're going in with a GM day one. You can kind of be partners, build this thing together instead of inheriting whatever plan is already halfway through and in place. And of the remaining ones, probably the playoff team, the Raiders. Even though I just talked about, look, if you don't like Derek Carr, you're not going to be into it, but you're coming into a team, maybe the expectations are a little too high, but you're coming into a team that probably is dying for a little bit of stability. They were a little too chaotic this year and all the things that they've gone through. So they're probably looking to slow it down and be patient with someone. So I'll go Broncos, Vikings, Raiders.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually almost the reverse of what I had. Because I was looking at the Raiders at the top there, just because I feel like the Raiders as a playoff roster, as you mentioned, but still with some mobility, right? If you don't like Derek Carr, you could come in this offseason and you could work with you could potentially figure out what the plans are and kind of figure out what that is before you step foot in that facility and take that job. And you can make an understanding or have an understanding of like, yeah, this is a team that wants to move on from Derek Carr this offseason and go and pursue, X quarterback, Z quarterback, whatever. Or they do want to move ahead with Derek Carr and you're good there. I don't think Derek Carr is a bad quarterback as long as you're able to be sort of that West Coast minded coach, or at least can bring in the play caller that could be West Coast minded and give Derek Carr the system that he performs pretty well in, which is what you're seeing him do right now. So I would agree. I think you have a playoff roster there. That's got to be your number one, right? That's pretty simple for me. Minnesota Vikings I have there too, because the ownership situation is just such a good and comfortable situation to walk into. I just feel like there's trust there, right? In terms of what the head coach wants to do, what they want to bring in. Mike Zimmer coming in and getting his shot. That alone is enough to tell you that, hey, that's a good situation to be in because they're willing to invest in the people that they believe in. And they gave Mike Zimmer a nice long opportunity to really get things figured out, gave him a lot of opportunities to figure things out there as well. So I think that that's a good place. And then I actually put the Chicago Bears in over the Denver Broncos. The only reason why I do that is because I really like Justin Fields. So I'm coming through in the mentality that you were sharing as like, if you do like the quarterback, then there are some spots that are good, right? So I'm coming in there. I like their defense. Jalen Johnson, I like what they're able to put together there. And I like the players that you're going to be able to maintain within that locker room if you come in and establish the right culture. I also really like Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, David Montgomery. Like there's a lot there to like. I think you have to reinvest in the offensive line a little bit. You need to reinvest a little bit at some of those skill positions to just continue to bolster the talent there. If you can get Allen Robinson to stick around, that'd be great. But if you can't, then that's fine. You just have to figure out another one there. You have a fantastic wide receiver draft coming up. You have a very nice wide receiver free agency pool about to come up as well. So if you are that offensive minded coach that is going to draw those players, then you kind of already have the built-in ammunition that you need to take the Chicago Bears job, work with Justin Fields and give him options and weapons around to run your scheme. Because I think Justin Fields is very scheme versatile. He learns quickly, all of that. You just kind of got to do some work on the offensive line, things like that. So I put
they all have their
Chicago
holes.
Bears there. Yeah, of course. I put the Chicago Bears there. My concern around the Denver Broncos is that it feels like less control. It feels like less opportunity there outside of ownership and everything. But gosh, I love what Peyton does there. And so like that is a very, very close one for me.
And there is always the outside possibility, gets rumored every single year, of a Sean Payton trade. But if that kind of stuff happens, they'll talk about it tomorrow on the Locked On NFL podcast. Tony and James, they'll make sure you guys keep up. We'll watch the David Culley, the Joe Judge thing. And of course, I think they have some playoff power rankings coming too. So make sure you check that out. Check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Help you get all of your gambling straight. We'll see you all tomorrow here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.